Hello. In today's video, we're gonna talk about using multiple different frame rates in one single timeline. How to do that. And then also talk about what is the ultimate best frame rate. Is there actually one? But right now, you're seeing this video in 60 frames per second, or rather 59.94. But you're looking at me in 29.97. Sometimes people call this 30, but technically what you're watching right now is 29.97 frames per second. But you are seeing me in 23.98. Some people call this 24, and 25 if you're in Europe, which is actually 25 frame rates. But now we're gonna move our hands to show you what the motion blur looks like in each frame rate. Much more blurry over here in 24, isn't it? Thanks, guys. So how are you seeing all of us in the same timeline, at the same time, on the same video, in different frame rates? Well, here's the rule. Whatever the fastest frame rate is, the highest frame rate, perhaps 60, set your timeline to that. In this case, for this video, we set it to 59.94 and drop all of your footage into that timeline and make sure that it stays at the highest frame rate. You won't be able to display the 60 so that it truly looks like 60 if your timeline is 24 frames. And I'll show you that right now in Adobe Premiere. Right away, everyone's gonna be all up on me in the comments for not using Resolve. Talking about Adobe Premiere and Resolve these days is almost like talking about frame rates. People get so offended about choosing frame rates. Looking at these timelines, you'll see here, this timeline, you'll see this is the 59.94, and you'll see the confirmation there under the frame rate tab. That is what this is. And in this timeline, I have this clip here that is a 23.976, which again, like we're saying, that's just 24 frames. But you'll see this video is playing as if it is a 24 frame video. But how? It's in a 60 timeline. I'll come over here to this clip. Review on project, you'll see this is a 59.94. And when I press play, it looks like a 60 frame video. Very smooth, less motion blur. How's that happening? Well, all Adobe Premiere is doing is what's called a pull-up. This is where it will choose a sequence of frames, and I'll put you that sequence on screen. There's different pull-up patterns, different softwares use different pull-up patterns. Essentially all it does, but if I move this forward, you'll see I'm clicking forward. Not every time that I click the frame forward does the video actually advance. It sometimes will hold on to those frames an extra moment. 1, 2, 3, so that's the pattern, the pull down. 1, 2, and then it'll advance on this one. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. You can see that the pull down pattern in this case is a 2, 3, 2. And when you press play, go back, you're not noticing it pausing. It doesn't look perfectly 24, where if I came over here to this 24 timeline and played this, it's a bit more smooth because it's playing back in its native frame rate. As you see here, every time I hit advance, it's moving forward. Again, this timeline that I'm showing you here is 24 frames, and I'm playing a 24 frame file, 23.98. And every time I'm pressing forward on my mouse, the clip is actually moving because it doesn't need to stretch those frames in order to hit 60 frames per second. And if you need a whole explanation about what frame rates are, if you're getting confused, I've done a bunch of videos. I did one on shutter angles, but I also did one on actual frames. What is the difference between different frame rates? I have a link for that below. And then I also did one about slow motion and frame rates, where if you want to bring everything into a 24 timeline, but you want it to be slow motion, what you're doing there. Jump over here in this timeline to the 60 frames video in the 24 timeline. When I press play here, you'll see how jittery it looks. It's very jittery. And why is that? Adobe Premiere here has to drop frames, has to get rid of frames that were actually in there. So what's happening is every time I'm clicking forward, it's jumping a few frames. That's why it gets that jittery effect. It's not as smooth, where if I were to go over 59 here and play that same clip of me dancing, it's going to be showing every frame in between. It's gonna show all 60 frames that it's captured. You can see how much more smooth this is. It's not jumping around. Yes, This is the stupid, ridiculous world of frame rates, but it's where we are at. So when you'll watch this video here, you can see, I'm gonna show you what this motion blur with this part of my Gorilla Pod, I think, what this looks like at different times. Here's 24, here's 30, and here's 60. And you'll see the motion blur is very different between each one. I still much prefer the motion blur from the 23.98, 24. It's just more romantic. And I know that's a vague term and it's not technical, but for me, my artistic preference is to have more of that blur. And it's also the cinematic visual language that's been around since sound was recorded. You see, 24 was introduced because it was the slowest that they could run film in order to have a sound strip on the side. When they were silent movies, they ran them at 16 frames or sometimes 18 frames. But 24 was the most affordable way to display sound in movie theaters. And the technical guys are gonna come at you and say, well, then why don't we do 60 these days? Because we're not shooting as much on film. Sure, but that is the established look. And perhaps in another generation, we can get rid of it. But right now, most of us prefer 24. I would say, or maybe you want to comment below, come at some people who like 60, or you 60ers, come at the people who like 24. Let's discuss this. Let's talk about this. We're gonna solve this frame rate issue right now, once and for all. His name is John C. Now, I know a bunch of you are gonna say, what about 120 frames, Mark? Well, what about it? Besides playing video games, when I'm playing Rocket League, there really isn't an application for 120 frames. Your TV does not show you any of your favorite TV stations in 120 frames. Your Blu-rays are not in 120 frames. They cap out at 60. Freaking YouTube caps out at 60 frames. Now, maybe you want to future-proof your videos, and 120 frames is really divisible into 60, so it's easy to take 120 frames and put it into 60 timeline. But there really isn't many places besides certain movie theaters that you can show high frame rate 120 frames movies. And there's even a debate in the scientific community whether we can actually see 120 frames. A lot of people believe that our eyes can only perceive up to 60 frames per second, and then after that we just perceive an idea of smoothness, of less motion blur. There's a whole debate with this, but I'm so amazed, and you'll see, look in the comments, there will be people really upset about this, that believe 120 is the only way to show it, or they believe 48 is what we should do because it's divisible into 24, so it's easy to pull down. I'll say this, we're gonna talk about the perfect frame rate. You're hearing me say all these numbers. Well, it's your favorite frame rate. That is the perfect one. Whatever you enjoy most, I recommend. Now for me, that is 24. I'm just inherently grown up watching movies. I did watch sports, but I liked that when I would watch a movie in 24, it looked different. The motion blur was more romantic in a way. It was smeared. It was the way I never saw the world. So I could suspend my disbelief when I saw that film. So for me, even when I do my documentary films, I want the audience to be immersed into a different world than their own. Even if I'm trying to help them grip to reality, I want these stories, even if it's just about people talking about their child on the autism spectrum, I want them to feel that it's larger than life. I want them to feel the immensity and the weight of the stories that we get to tell each other. And I just don't find that's communicated in 60. It feels too real. It doesn't help me escape the world we're in, which is what I'm hoping can occur with my films. But maybe you want your video, maybe you want your vlog to feel grounded in total reality. Then go nuts. Shoot 59.94 or 60 frames. Have the best time with that. I'm not gonna tell you to stop that. It's what you like and where you want to take it. You can take the audience into the world that you want. And if you're wondering what this sign is, that stands for AOD. That's the Art of Documentary. It's our course and academy. We have over 4,000 filmmakers in it. We're now starting to reinvest into your films. If you're part of AOD, we're helping you develop your films. We're putting money towards the projects you're working on. But what's even better is there's over 150 videos in AOD that is the complete guide to telling compelling films. We help you learn the business side of film, how to grow your businesses, how to get six-figure contracts, tracks. And then also too, we have our new course, The Perfect Cut. This is Lewis Gordon. He's part of our team. He's a professional editor. He's cut many feature films, won many awards, and he takes you into a 40 video complete dive into storytelling, how to craft your edits, and how to edit faster and more efficiently, and to never lose a clip again. He actually goes into how to organize your edits, which is really amazing. But that's the art of documentary. It's my favorite thing I've ever done. It's cooler than any film I've worked on. Growing this community has been the biggest gift to me since starting my YouTube channel. But thank you for watching this frame rate video. I hope it made sense. And if you're confused, I'll try to get to all the comments as I usually do. Until then, have a fantastic day.